In the 1950s and 60s, when automobiles were like LinkedIn profiles for upwardly mobile Americans, could a simple door handle be a status symbol? General Motors definitely thought so, and as a kid, I did too. The GM paddle handle is today's topic, here on Hubcap Club. So what exactly can you learn about GM from this unassuming, chromium-plated, paddle-shaped interior door handle? All I can say is that for a weird kid like me, growing up in the 60s, this handle taught me a lot about how car makers subtly manipulate buyers. I'm serious. This is the video I've long wanted to make, but I was afraid you'd make fun of me. Now I guess I'll find out. Look at these door panels. One has the most common type of door handle from the 50s and 60s. You wrap your hand around it and pull upward, and the latch releases so you can push the door outward to exit the car. The other has a handle that works exactly the same way, but its pivot point is hidden under the armrest. Instead of a thin lever, it features a wide paddle you can lightly cradle with just your fingertips. The paddle handle offers no additional functionality, but it somehow seems more like a piece of jewelry than just a hunk of metal with a hole in it. As a young person, I was obsessed by cars, and I knew the make and model of nearly every car I encountered in our suburban neighborhood and the city at large. I'm not even sure how I acquired this info, as I had no reference materials to guide me. My family owned an older car, because that's all we could afford, but many of our neighbors were wealthier, and I loved to check out their shiny late model cars. I began noticing both major and minor differences between the cars I encountered. Hardtops versus sedans, wheel covers versus hubcaps, white wall versus black wall tires, power versus cranked windows, basically anything I could see from the outside or by peeking through the windows. Looking back, I must have looked sus, peeking into cars all the time. But I was doing serious research. One thing I particularly noticed about some late model GM cars was how the interior door handles were integrated into the armrest. What did it mean? Eavesdropping on adult conversations, I learned that people were often judged based on the make, year, and model of the car they drove. It became obvious to me that in adult society, cars represented a lot more than just transportation. In the 50s and 60s, many Americans chose a car at least partially because they thought it would bring them respect and admiration. Many people traded in and traded up every few years, even if their car was in good shape, even if they couldn't afford it, just to keep up with their friends and neighbors. As Vance Packard wrote in his 1959 bestseller, The Status Seekers, over the years, the automobile makes succeeded in building up a status hierarchy for automobiles that was well understood by the public. General Motors was the pioneer in tying cars to social status. Way back in the 1920s, GM chairman Alfred P. Sloan unveiled his signature marketing philosophy, a car for every purse and purpose, commonly known as Sloan's Ladder of Success. The idea of Sloan's Ladder was that no GM customer would ever have a reason to leave the General Motors family. As a young person's income grew over the years, they would climb the ladder by trading in their current car for the higher status and higher priced car on the next rung. In order to encourage buyers to keep climbing that ladder, GM began restyling their cars on a yearly basis. This made older cars unfashionable and shortened the time between repeat purchases, one aspect of what came to be known as planned obsolescence. Sloan added and discontinued makes over the years in pursuit of the perfect lineup. By 1940, the official rungs of the ladder were firmly in place: Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and Cadillac. This lineup would last for decades and was in full effect during the 1959 to 1967 period I'm covering in this video. But this brand-level ladder of success was only part of Sloan's strategy. Within each make was a second sub-ladder of model lines with ascending prices. The ladder metaphor doesn't work as well here, so I like to think of the makes as floors of a building and the models as the stairs between each floor. I call it the Sloan Skyscraper. I know my skyscraper is only 5 stories tall, but please grant me a little poetic license. This graphic reflects the GM model lines of 1959. As buyers climbed the stairs between brands, they could either proceed from Chevrolet straight to Pontiac or higher, or else jump from model to model within the Chevy lineup. When compact and mid-size model lines debuted in the 60s, each also had its own hierarchy. Just as GM was competing with other car makers, GM divisions were competing with each other. The most expensive Chevy cost more than the cheapest Pontiac, the priciest Pontiac was more expensive than the cheapest Olds, and so on. Only Cadillac stood alone, as its cheapest model was more expensive than any other GM car, and owning any Cadillac gave you top-of-the-world status. In addition to mechanical upgrades, there were many visual cues that GM used to coax buyers into stepping up to their more premium makes and models. The cars got longer, wider, and fancier as the sticker price rose higher. But there's one interior upgrade that GM seldom mentioned in advertisements and brochures. It was so subtle that it might have been only subliminally noticed by many people. Yet it was obviously part of GM's crafty strategy to upsell buyers. Yes, you guessed it. It's the paddle handle, introduced by GM across its all-new 1959 lineup. In this inaugural year, let's see which cars got the fancy handles and which had to make do with old-fashioned grab and pull handles. Be sure to watch until the end if you want to learn where GM got the idea for this uniquely shaped door handle. Its official name seems to be Padde-style door release. As I said, it was barely referenced in GM marketing. The only mention I could find was in this 1961 Chevrolet brochure where it describes Impala's fingertip door releases and custom length armrests. Starting at Chevrolet, the bottom floor of the Sloan Skyscraper, only the top-of-the-line Impala got the paddle. So although Chevy was GM's low-price offering, they still wanted to add a little premium pizzazz to its flagship model. Next, Pontiac. For reasons unknown to me, Pontiac ignored the paddle until the 1965 model year. Up to and including 1964, all Pontiacs, including Bonneville and Grand Prix, used the same style door handles as the cheapest Chevy Biscayne. I'm not sure why, so if you have any insights, let me know in the comments. For Oldsmobile, only the Super 88 and 98 had paddles in 1959. For Buick, only the top-of-the-line Electra was paddle-equipped, but more Buicks would have them the following year. You probably won't be surprised to learn that all 1959 Cadillacs sported paddles. GM would continue to install paddles on selected models through the 1967 model year. So it turns out that, as a 6-year-old, wandering my suburban neighborhood, peeking into cars, the paddle-style door handle was my key to understanding what the Sloan Skyscraper was all about. Many little upgrades that together made a car feel more luxurious. So, while the handle itself was the same part across most GM makes, the implementations were quite varied. Let me show you some of the ways these paddle levers were used on various models. Let's start with the outlandishly garish 59 Cadillac 62 convertible. I picked this one because the family across the street from us owned one. It was bright red, just like this. As a young kid, it seemed like something a movie star would drive. I was friends with their daughter, so I got to ride in it quite a bit. No seatbelts in those days, and I remember sliding around on that mile-wide leather-pleated back seat, pretending this car was mine and feeling on top of the world. But I digress. Because the Caddy's armrest is a massive affair that spans the entire width of the door, the paddle sits in a chrome well cut out of the armrest. This is one luxurious ride. But I have to ask, is that power window switch supposed to be crooked? And notice the chromed grille over the vent on the kick panel, another subtle touch of luxury. Traveling all the way back down to the ground floor of the Sloan Skyscraper, here's a 1964 Chevy Impala SS two-door hardtop, just like one of my best friends had in the early 70s. Since it's a Chevy, it sports a simpler implementation of the paddle, jutting out from the front of a much smaller armrest, dressed up with a thin chrome band around its perimeter. Check out this TV commercial for the 64 Impala. Notice how the camera zooms in on the handle, just for a moment, just long enough for you to notice, if only subliminally. And just to make sure they got the point across, the shot is repeated at the end of the spot, followed by a feminine voice seductively suggesting,
"I buy a more expensive car when you get such elegance in Chevrolet for 1964. See it tomorrow at your Chevrolet dealers."
This would be a good time to show you this worksheet I created after looking at hundreds of photos and brochures of GM cars of this era. According to my informal research, these are most, if not all, of the GM models that used the paddle handle. Model lines that never had the paddle are not included here. Now, I'm not claiming this worksheet is 100% accurate, so I welcome any verifiable corrections. And it does get confusing, as paddles are sometimes added to vintage cars when they're restored or customized. There are a lot of blank cells on this worksheet, because GM often added, discontinued, or changed the names of model lines during this period. And if you don't see a GM model line listed here at all, it's because it never used the paddle. Notice a lot of no's for Pontiacs, because, as I stated earlier, they seem to have completely rejected the paddle until the 1965 model year. Here's a grab handle 64 Grand Prix, followed by a paddle-equipped 65. What a gorgeous interior! I believe that's real wood on the dash and console. And then there are the station wagons. Wagons usually followed the lead of the model line they were part of, like this 1960 Chevy Impala Nomad wagon and 1965 Buick Skylark Sport wagon. There were exceptions, like this unpaddled 59 Nomad, and as far as I can tell, the car-based Chevy El Camino pickup never had paddles. I've posted a link to a PDF of this worksheet in the description if you want to take a closer look. One takeaway from my research is that paddle availability was based on model, meaning that all cars of that model line would have the fancier door handle. So here's a mystery I'd like to solve. It concerns the 1967 Oldsmobile 442. The 442 was still an option package, and it was offered only on the Cutlass Supreme, which, as top of the midsize lineup, was outfitted with paddle handles. Here's a good example. Note that it has the Cutlass Supreme CS badge on the trunk lid. But here's another 67 442. It also has the CS badge, yet it has ye olde grab and yank handle. The door panel doesn't look right either, and the windowsill is bare metal when it normally would be vinyl covered. So my question is this car a replica 442, or could it have come from the factory this way? This provides me the perfect opportunity to show this photo of another 442 where the paddle has been installed in conjunction with a standard shorter armrest. This really doesn't look right. I'm pretty sure that no GM cars ever left the factory with fully exposed paddles. Okay, I hope you're ready for the wildest implementation of the luxury lever. The double paddle, first seen on the 1963 Buick Riviera, and then later on the Olds Toronado and Cadillac Eldorado. Here's a 64 Riviera. I guess two handles are better than one, at least if you're sitting in the back seat and want to let yourself out. This similar implementation on the 66 Toronado reveals another secret of the paddle. Although most GM cars used the original version, there were variations. This is what I call the fold-over paddle. This double-paddled 1967 Eldorado has yet a different version. It doesn't fold over, but it has a nearly flat, brushed metal top with a beveled edge. Now, I don't want to give the incorrect impression that alternate paddle styles were only on double-paddled doors. Here's another type as used on 1963 Cadillacs. I'm sure there are even more minor variations, but I had to end my search somewhere, as I don't plan on making this the subject of a doctoral thesis. And here's the fun fact I promised. GM didn't come up with the idea for the paddle handle, it was a competitor. Over the years, Chrysler Corporation closely studied GM marketing and created their own ladder of success with a similar brand lineup. A paddle-style door handle was introduced on 1957 Chryslers and Imperials. Chrysler's integrated handle stuck up vertically from the armrest instead of sideways like GM's version, but it obviously was the inspiration. After all, the all-new GM cars for 1959 were a direct response to Chrysler's style-leading 1957 forward-look cars. The biggest difference between Chrysler and GM's implementation of the Paddle is which cars got it. Chrysler reserved it for its most expensive cars. GM sprinkled it throughout their lineup so that buyers of low and medium-priced cars could also claim a little bit of extra status. 1967 was the final year for the Padde-style door release. Trying to stay ahead of upcoming federal motor vehicle safety standards, GM introduced redesigned door handles on all of its 1968 models. The main concern was making it harder for the latching mechanism to accidentally engage and cause the door to fly open during a collision. Suddenly, a fingertip door release was a safety hazard instead of a benefit. Most GM cars used this pull-up handle, integrated with the armrest, but utilizing a different style handle. The premium design used in luxury models did feature fully recessed handles that completely eliminated any snag hazard. Although I hope I've answered some of your pressing paddle questions in this video, I've also asked a few. Here's just one more. In my personal experience, the paddle handle seemed to take less effort to operate. Is it just the power of suggestion? Is it the positioning of the hand? Or is the door release mechanism somehow different in paddle cars? Please enlighten me. I don't think anyone ever gazed lovingly at the door panels of their Impala or Skylark and said to themselves, "My car has the same door handles as a Cadillac." No, it's just one of many small upgrades that GM used to coax you into climbing up to the next rung of its ladder of success. And I'm just a tiny bit proud that I cracked the code of Sloan's ladder when I was just a kid. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I read them all, and often I learn something new. And as always, I appreciate your suggestions for future topics. It's going to take a while to get to all of them, but I'm up to the challenge. Until next time, for Hubcap Club, I'm Rob.